I woke up before the sun, just like I always did. The house was silent, too silent. I turned over, half expecting to feel Lauren beside me, but all I got was cold sheets. It had been weeks since she slept next to me. At first, there were excuses. It was too warm, she felt restless, she needed space. But lately, she didn't even bother coming up with a reason. I sat up, rubbing my face as I stared at the empty side of the bed. My wedding ring felt heavier than usual, like my body already knew something my mind was still refusing to accept. Downstairs, I went through the motions, making coffee, the familiar smell filling the kitchen. It wrapped around me like a memory I didn't know whether to cherish or resent. Lauren used to love waking up to fresh coffee. Now, she barely noticed it. I heard the soft shuffle of feet behind me, and for a brief second, I let myself hope. Maybe today would be different. Maybe she'd look at me, say good morning, smile the way she used to. "Morning," I said. "Nothing." She walked right past me, treating me like I was nothing more than a piece of furniture. I watched her open the fridge, grab a bottle of water, and check her phone, her fingers moving fast, typing, scrolling, engaged with someone. Just not me. I waited. Just one glance. One word. Nothing. "Lauren," I tried again. She let out a sigh, already irritated. "I have to get ready." That was it. No eye contact. No warmth. Not even the absent-minded kiss on the cheek she used to give me without thinking. I let out a slow breath. I was a ghost in my own home, and the worst part? I had no idea why. That night, I lay in bed alone again, staring up at the ceiling. The weight on my chest was growing heavier with every passing day. I couldn't keep pretending this was normal. And deep inside, a quiet voice whispered something I wasn't ready to face. What if this is the end? I used to believe love had a sound. The warmth in Lauren's voice when she said my name. The quiet laughter we shared over inside jokes no one else would understand. The way she used to hum along to the radio while she cooked dinner. No. Love was silence. I woke up to the faint sound of the shower running. That was new. Lauren was always the one who stayed in bed, wrapped up in the blankets, groaning about not wanting to start the day. I used to bring her coffee in bed just to hear her sleepy, mumbled "Thank you, babe." No. I wasn't even a thought in her morning routine. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bathroom door. It was cracked open just enough for steam to roll out, fogging up the mirror across from me. I could barely make out my own reflection, but that didn't really matter. I already felt like a ghost anyway. When she finally stepped out, towel wrapped around her, she barely glanced my way. She walked straight to the closet, moving around me like I wasn't even there. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice light, careful. Testing the waters. She muttered something back. Maybe a morning, maybe just an irritated sigh. I should have let it go. I should have accepted that this was just how things were now. But I couldn't. I followed her into the closet. "Lauren, talk to me." She exhaled sharply and yanked a blouse off the hanger. "I don't have time for this." "Time for what?" I asked, stepping closer. "A conversation." A second of acknowledgement. She turned around so fast I almost took a step back. "Ethan," I said, "I don't have time. I have a meeting in an hour." I studied her face, searching for something. Regret. Guilt. Even anger. But there was nothing. Just irritation, like I was an inconvenience, like I was someone getting in the way of her morning routine, not the man she had vowed to spend her life with. I swallowed hard. "Do you even care?" For just a second, something flickered in her eyes. Hesitation. But instead of answering, she turned back to the mirror and started buttoning her blouse. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't in my head. It wasn't paranoia. Lauren had already checked out of our marriage. And I was the only one left still trying to keep it together. That night, she came home late. Again. I was sitting at the kitchen table, phone in my hand, but not really reading anything. My dinner sat in front of me, untouched. I had made 2 plates. Hers was still covered in foil, waiting. I heard the front door open, followed by the familiar click of her heels against the floor. She walked in, barely looked at me, then glanced at the untouched plate. "You didn't have to wait." That was all she said. No, sorry, I'm late. No, work was crazy tonight. Just that. My jaw tightened. You could have texted. She sighed as she dropped her bag onto the counter. I was busy. I stared at her, something burning inside me. You're always busy lately. She rolled her eyes. Ethan, please. Not tonight. Not tonight. Not ever. She kicked off her shoes and rubbed her temples like I was the exhausting part of her day. And that's when it hit me. She didn't just not love me anymore. She resented me. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, loud in the otherwise silent kitchen. My heart was hammering in my chest, but my mind was completely still. I left my untouched plate on the table and walked out of the kitchen. That was the night I knew something was deeply, painfully wrong. And for the first time, I let myself wonder. Was there someone else? I left the house that morning without saying another word to her. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. I drove aimlessly, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My thoughts were a mess, looping over and over again through every interaction, every moment I had ignored or excused away. How long had she been pulling away? How long had I been fooling myself? I didn't want to admit it, but deep down, I already knew this wasn't some sudden shift. Lauren had been leaving me in pieces, one late night at a time, one excuse after another, one empty glance that used to be filled with love. And I had just stood there, waiting for her to come back to me, not realizing she never planned to. At some point, I ended up parked outside an old diner. I didn't think, I just got out of the car and went inside. The place hadn't changed in years. The smell of coffee and fried food lingered in the air, and the cracked leather booths looked exactly the same as they had when Lauren and I used to come here. Except this time, I was alone. I slid into a booth near the window and ordered a black coffee. I wasn't hungry. I just needed something to do with my hands. As I sat there, staring blankly at my untouched cup, I felt someone watching me. I glanced up. A woman stood a few feet away, holding her own coffee cup, studying me with quiet curiosity. She looked about my age, dark hair pulled into a loose bun, wearing a simple sweater and jeans. She hesitated before speaking. Rough morning. I blinked. Do I know you? She smiled faintly. No. But I've been sitting across the diner watching you stare at that coffee like it holds the answers to your problems. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Yeah, something like that. She nodded toward the empty seat across from me. Mind if I sit? I should have said no. I wasn't in the mood for conversation. But something in me shifted. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in weeks, someone actually saw me. I nodded. Go ahead. She slid into the booth, setting her coffee down. I'm Mia, by the way. Ethan. She nodded, tapping her fingers against the ceramic cup. So, Ethan, you want to talk about it? I exhaled heavily, rubbing a hand over my face. Honestly, I don't even know where to start. She smirked slightly. Well, lucky for you, I'm a pretty good listener. And just like that, I started talking. I don't know why I told her everything. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that I had spent so long being ignored that when someone finally looked at me instead of through me, I couldn't help but spill everything. Mia just sat there, hands wrapped around her coffee cup, listening. She didn't interrupt, didn't give me those pitying looks people give when they don't know what to say. She just let me talk. I told her how Lauren used to be my best friend. How we were inseparable for years, finishing each other's thoughts, knowing each other's routines like second nature. I told her about the road trips, the lazy Sundays, the stupid little arguments that always ended in laughter. And then, I told her about the silence. The distance. The night spent lying awake, staring at the ceiling, while the woman I loved slept a million miles away, even though she was right beside me. When I finished, Mia sat back, exhaling. So she just left you with this? She asked, nodding toward the note I had pulled from my pocket. Not officially, I muttered. She's still in the house. Still going through the motions. But emotionally, she left a long time ago. Mia tilted her head. I don't get people like that. I frowned. Like what? People who don't have the guts to just say what they want, she said, shaking her head. If she wanted out, she should have just told you, instead of making you live in this weird slow-motion breakup. I blinked. That was exactly what it felt like. She nodded, reading my expression. Like she's leaving, but instead of packing a bag and walking out, she's doing it in tiny, excruciating steps. One missing dress at a time. One ignored conversation at a time. Like she's erasing you before she even leaves. Her words hit me harder than I expected. That was exactly what Lauren had been doing. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. Mia sighed, taking a sip of her coffee. I've seen it before. People don't always leave in a single moment. Sometimes, they leave piece by piece, until there's nothing left of them in your world. And when they're finally gone, you look around and realize they took you with them. I swallowed hard. What are you, a therapist or something? I asked. She smirked. No. Just someone who's been there. For the first time, I really looked at her. The tiredness in her eyes. The way she stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, lost in thought. She had lived through this. What happened? I asked before I could stop myself. Mia glanced at me, then down at her cup. For a moment, I thought she wasn't going to answer. But then, she sighed. My ex-husband, she said simply. One day, he just stopped seeing me. Kind of like what you're going through now. We still shared a house. Still went through the motions. But I could feel it. I could feel that he had already left. He just hadn't figured out how to say it yet. I frowned. How did you know for sure? She let out a soft, humorless laugh. He started living like I wasn't there. Coming home late without an excuse. Making plans without including me. But the one that really got me. She shook her head. He stopped saying good night. I exhaled, nodding slowly. That was the moment I knew, she continued. Because you don't think about it. But when you've been with someone for years, and they stop saying good night, it's like a little death every time. Silence settled between us. Not awkward. Just understanding. Finally, Mia tilted her head. So, what are you gonna do now? I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. I don't know. I don't want to be the guy who fights for someone who's already checked out. But I also don't want to just roll over and let my marriage end without a fight. Mia studied me for a long moment. Then she leaned forward. Ethan, let me ask you something. I looked at her. If Lauren walked out right now, officially, for real, how much of yourself would she take with her? The question hung heavy in the air. I opened my mouth to answer, but for the first time, I wasn't sure what to say. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. She had already taken too much. I drove home that night feeling like I had left something behind in that diner. Like a piece of me was still sitting in that booth, staring across the table at Mia, hearing the truth I had refused to say out loud until now. Maybe it was denial crumbling. Maybe it was just exhaustion finally catching up to me. Either way, I felt lighter, and at the same time, heavier. When I pulled into the driveway, Lauren's car was already parked in its usual spot. The porch light was on, casting long shadows across the yard. For the first time in weeks, I hesitated before walking inside. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. A confrontation. An argument. Some kind of confession. But when I stepped through the front door, the house was as silent as ever. Upstairs, I heard movement. The faint rustle of fabric. The sound of drawers opening and closing. I set my keys down on the table and walked up the stairs, my heartbeat steady, my thoughts tangled. When I reached the bedroom, I stopped in the doorway. Lauren was standing by the dresser, folding clothes into a suitcase. A suitcase. For a long moment, I just stood there, taking in the sight. She didn't hear me at first. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. She was focused. Her movements were precise, methodical. Like this wasn't a last-minute decision. Like she had been planning this for a long time. I exhaled. So this is it. She froze, fingers gripping a shirt in her hands. Then, slowly, she turned to face me. There was no sadness on her face. No regret. Just that same distant expression I had grown so used to. "I was going to tell you," she said. I let out a bitter laugh. "When?" "After you were already gone." She looked away, pressing her lips together. I took a step into the room, my voice calm but firm. "How long have you been planning this?" She swallowed, glancing at the half-packed suitcase. "A while." I felt something twist in my chest. "And you didn't think I deserved to know?" She let out a breath. "Ethan, I didn't want a big fight. I didn't want to drag this out." I stared at her, those words settling over me. Drag this out. Like our marriage was just an inconvenience she was trying to get rid of as quickly as possible. My jaw clenched. "Were you ever going to tell me the truth?" Her eyes flickered. Just for a second. But it was enough. I saw it. Hesitation. I let out a slow breath, nodding. "Right. That's what I thought." She looked away. I stepped past her, running a hand through my hair. My head was pounding. For weeks, I had been searching for the moment I had lost her. But now, standing in our bedroom, watching her pack a suitcase like I was just another phase in her life she was ready to leave behind, I realized something. I hadn't lost her. She had let go of me a long time ago. And I had been too blind to see it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavier than it ever had before. Then finally, Lauren sighed. "Ethan, I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Don't," I said quietly. Whatever she was about to say, I didn't want to hear it. She closed her mouth, her expression unreadable. I turned away, gripping the edge of the dresser, staring down at the wood grain beneath my fingers. There was nothing left to fight for. Nothing left to save. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. I took a deep breath. Exhaled. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out of the room. And this time, I didn't look back. I sat in my car for a long time after leaving the house. The engine was off, the only sound was the faint hum of crickets outside, but my mind was loud. Memories. Conversations. The questions that had no answers. I should have felt something. Anger. Heartbreak. Relief. But all I felt was hollow. I gripped the steering wheel, staring blankly at the dashboard. For months, I had been trying to fix something that had been broken long before I even noticed the cracks. Now that it was over, I was just sitting here, stunned, while Lauren walked away without a second thought. Was this what she wanted? For me to just disappear from her life as easily as she had erased me from hers? A part of me wanted to drive back, to demand an explanation, to force her to see me one last time before she left. But I knew better. Some people don't leave with a dramatic exit. They just stop being yours long before they walk out the door. And Lauren, she had been gone for a long time. I exhaled slowly, pulling out my phone. No missed calls. No texts. Of course, there weren't. I clicked on our old messages, scrolling up. Most of them were months old. Casual conversations, reminders about groceries, the occasional love you from before things started falling apart. Then I saw it. The last time she had texted me first. 3 months ago. "Hey, I might be home late. Don't wait up." That was it. That was the last time she had made an effort, even in the smallest way. I let out a bitter laugh and turned off my phone. She had been giving me clues this whole time, hadn't she? I just refused to see them. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling. If she wanted to go, I wasn't going to stop her. But that didn't mean I was going to sit here and drown in the empty spaces she left behind, either. I put the key in the ignition, started the car, and pulled out of the driveway. But I didn't drive home. Because home wasn't a place anymore. It was just a reminder of everything I had already lost. I wasn't sure where I was going until I ended up there, outside the same diner from before. The neon sign flickered, buzzing softly, casting a glow against the pavement. Through the window, I could see a few late-night stragglers, an older man reading a newspaper, a couple sharing a milkshake, a waitress wiping down the counter. And then, in the corner booth, Mia. She was staring out the window, chin resting in her hand, her expression distant. I didn't know why I had come here. Maybe because she was the first person in a long time to actually see me. Maybe because I wasn't ready to go back to an empty house just yet. Or maybe, just maybe, because, for the first time since this all started, I didn't want to be alone. I stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled. Mia looked up, her eyes meeting mine. For a moment, she just watched me. Then she smiled, small, knowing, like she understood exactly why I was there without me having to say a word. And just like that, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. I walked toward her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally moving forward. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.